A very good afternoon to each one of you. I'm Rupa, Assistant Secretary General at BCIC. On behalf of Bangalore Chamber of Industry and Commerce, we welcome you all for this exclusive webinar on technology as a key enabler for sustainability. The session is addressed by Mr. Rohit Chashta, who is the India Sustainability Leader at Schneider Electric. Thank you very much, sir, for accepting our invitation to address at this session. So this exclusive webinar is organized under the aegis of ESG Expert Committee of the Chamber. The committee is chaired by Mr. Mohan, who is the Senior General Manager at Bosch India, and co-chaired by Mr. Rajat Shaha, who is the Country Environment and Sustainability Manager at ABB India. I also welcome our Secretary General, Colonel Harish, who is with us. Welcome, sir.
Hello.
And we have two special dignitaries from Schneider Electric, Mr. Rashid Siddique, who is the DGM of International Operations at Schneider, and accompanied by Mr. Rajat. So welcome, sir, for the chamber, and we welcome all the participants once again for this webinar. Sir, I would like to briefly introduce Mr. Rohit Chashta. He comes with over 11 years of experience, and he has been instrumental in leading Schneider Electric's sustainability transformation while supporting diverse clients in achieving their sustainability goals. He also holds esteemed certifications, including Certified Measurement and Verification Professional Certification, ISO 5001 Lead Auditor, and Lead Green Associate, showcasing dedication to advancing sustainability practices. So thanks once again, Mr. Rohit Chashta. And before I hand over the stage to Mr. Mohan, on behalf of the Chamber, we would like to acknowledge our annual sponsors for their immense support to the Chamber in the activities. Now over to you, sir, for setting the context.
Yeah, thanks, Rupa. Thanks for organizing this webinar. First and foremost, thanks the people from different organizations who have joined today for the webinar. And thanks to Mr. Rohit Chashta for taking his time and sharing their experiences because sustainability is something where it needs a lot of exchange of information between organizations, and this is where BCIC is supporting not only major companies, also medium and small scale industries, because that is where we have the challenges. Also, as a part of BRSR, as you know, we need to carry our supply chain, both upstream and downstream. Of course, downstream is always major customers, but upstream is where this would help, indirectly it will help major companies to build that capacity within the medium and small scale industry. So my request to Mr. Chashta is whenever you speak from your experience, also see how you can speak about translating some of these initiatives in medium and small scale industries. The technology is something which is playing a very important role in sustainability sphere. And from Bosch being working there for 24 years, I know how we are using technology. So as you know, Bosch was the first auto component industry to be carbon neutral, scope 1 and 2 in 2020. Then on, we have used various interventions in terms of technology in the area of water conservation, energy conservation, you name it, there is technology and it is supporting our initiatives. As we know, sustainability and climate action or carbon management is shaping the entire business for the future. Already it is there, but in the days to come, it will play a major role. And globally, we need to reach that level of net zero, which would make our life better here. And you can come out of many problems what we have today across different regions. So from the global, it will come to the regions or the countries. For example, when I speak about region, it could be EU, which has uniform policy across the member states. It could be countries like India, China, and US. And then it will come down to organization level, where we need to work on decarbonization as a whole and realize our, true north target of net zero. But of late, we are seeing many geopolitical developments. We know what is happening in US after the elections in terms of, various initiatives, green initiatives. Even Germany, there are indications coming. They want to go back to the, non-renewable energy resources. So these things are there. But in spite of these challenges, I am sure we are going to travel through this journey of net zero. And I'm very keen to understand here case studies from Schneider. I have selfish motive at looking at what I can copy from their, initiatives. So if Rajesh is there, Rajesh, you want to speak few words, the co-chair?
Sir, we'll be joining in another few minutes, sir.
Okay, then over to Rupa.
Thank you very much, sir. And we have our immediate past president, Dr. Devarajan. So would you be able to speak something?
Sure. Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, Mohan, and Rohit. Thanks very much for this. I just saw the importance of sustainability everywhere. So I think it's important we understand each other, like Mohan did say, sharing of information, sharing of technology, application. Most important is the application of these technologies towards the benefit. I know US is turning around, but definitely it will be back because the nature is extremely important for us to safeguard. I think it will show its true terms if we don't take care of it. I think another thing which is most important from BCIC angle is how we can take it up with all the medium and small scale industries and how to take up tier 1, tier 2. An automobile company like us, the most important is scope 3 because huge amount of users is going away. I think almost 90% is in scope 3 for us. So I think whatever we do inside the factory along with the supply chain, tier 1, tier 2 may not be enough if we don't bring products which is green and self-sufficient. So I think it's important for us to drive sustainability from design, from manufacturing, from usage, and again reuse back. I think it's an important cycle and it's a continuous journey. And from Bangalore Chamber of Commerce, we are very, very particular that whatever we talk, let it be practical, applied method, and see that it is user benefit for all of us together as a community. And I know very well Schneider has done a fantastic job. Bosch is doing a fantastic job. Toyota, each one is excellent in that area, but it is a continuous journey. Each one will learn, each one unlearn many things, application of it. I think it's that's why I joined immediately on seeing this invitation. It's important for sustainability, important for manufacturing. From BCIC, Rohit, I think we have got more than 28 expert committees with us. Each one should talk about sustainability because it's applicable everywhere. Small scale industries, including the some of the industries in which you can save a lot of water, save a lot of energy. And I think you can cover it in a broader sense, but I think your experience of Schneider would be extremely helpful for us in our case. Thank you very much, Rupa, and all the team members there, and looking forward for a learning experience from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. That was Dr. Devarajan, our immediate past president and senior vice president at TVS Motor. Now the stage is all yours, Mr. Rohit. Please take it over from here.
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Rupa, and thank you, Mr. Mohan and Mr. Devarajan. I think very pertinent points, sir, both of you have put here in this particular case, and I'm, extremely aligned with you on that point. When we talk about sustainability, it has to come with collaboration as the key sort of piece on that particular area, and no one can actually do it on their own. That's how the whole subject is, even if someone wants to put that particular effort. So with that, again, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here and share our thoughts and share in terms of what we are doing with the organization in this case. So as I'm speaking, I'm also sharing my screen so that we can put it as some of the slides that I wanted to show to you in terms of what we are doing, and hope it is visible to everyone. I hope the slides are there.
Yes, it is
Okay,
clear.
great. So how we can, basically, just wanted to put this to everyone again. Already Miss Rupa had kind of given the context, and Mr. Mohan, Mr. Devrajan had put that point. But just for everyone's reference, in case someone is joining late, my name is Rohit Chashta. I lead various sustainability initiatives for Schneider Electric in India. And the whole idea of this webinar is where we are basically talking about and discussing what are the possible ways and roadmaps which can make organizations, enterprises, companies more sustainable, and how in that overall roadmap how technology plays a crucial role in this particular aspect. And of course that supported by some of the case studies, and even like what has been Schneider Electric's journey when it comes to the whole sustainability aspect. All of that we will surely discussing the same. In between, if you have any, thoughts, comments, questions, I'm sure please feel free to put that on the chat, and we can always discuss, and kind of I can try to answer the same as well. So just to kind of begin, as I was mentioning that, we can kind of take up this particular webinar with the overall piece of what are the trends and challenges, what is this whole aspect of climate change and sustainability that we are seeing in the world today, how's the landscape evolving, how are the organizations at the same time are striving to become more sustainable, and how technology plays a role in that, and then some examples and case studies, especially with the reference of what is Schneider Electric doing in this space when it comes to our own sustainability journey, and even helping others and working with other organizations. I was very happy to see Mr. Mohan talk about this whole aspect of scope 3, and also, how MSMEs can get into this whole conversation. So this is something that I've specifically, it's good that we are aligned on that point, and this is specifically, there is some a good work that we are doing on that part, and I have specifically kept some aspects of that as well during the later part of the webinar. So I hope it would be useful for people to get into that conversation, or and see what's happening on that front as well. So with that, let's start with this whole piece of, what is this whole climate change sustainability? I'm sure everyone would have seen this multiple times, but just to set the context, I think the lesser, it's never enough, no matter how much emphasis we make on this aspect, but it is never enough to emphasize the point that climate crisis is a code red for humanities. We are seeing extreme weather conditions, whether it is on sites of glaciers melting, flash flooding happening, whether we talk about forest fires, ocean acidification, droughts. We are seeing all of these. Again, the point is not that earlier it was not happening, but the frequency of the same has increased quite a bit in the recent, couple of decades when we see in terms of how the world is moving. And even if we put at from a point of view of from a philosophical point of view, it's very well said that the earth is something that we are not kind of like operating on it. It is something that we have kind of inherited from our previous generation, and will be leaving something for the future generation. So we have to make sure that the future is bright, and 50 years, 30 years, 40 years down the line, we should not be having that scenario where someone is asking us that, what did you guys do when you were having the power to change things? So this is where we need to make sure that we are avoiding this whole aspect of climate crisis, which is nothing but a global threat and a code red for humanity. And all of this, the reason why this is happening is with this whole aspect of climate urgency, which is nothing but we are all trying to limit the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius or below by the end of this century as compared to the pre-industrial level. If we talk about the current pledges and commitments, it puts the world on a trajectory which is not enough, has also been kind of kind of emphasized, or it can be kind of amplified also in certain forums, various platforms, that what we are doing currently is not enough. So where we are going is somewhere in the trajectory of 2.5 to 2.9 degrees Celsius, Although even if we completed all our pledges and commitments, we'll still not end up in the right scenario. And in order to do that, we need to be 3 to 5 times higher and faster in terms of abating the emission reduction that we are doing in this particular context. And of course, strive to become zero or near to zero by the aspect of 2050 and around that time. So this is where our whole sort of efforts are, that will limit the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius and below in this particular aspect. And this is where a lot of organizations we are seeing across the world that there's a whole movement of climate action that has been started. Whether you talk about science-based targets, you talk about carbon neutrality. We just kind of heard from the honorable chair that carbon neutrality was one thing that Bosch did quite early in their sort of journey as well. So we have science-based targets, we have carbon neutrality, net zero emissions. All these things is something that companies are very much now focusing on, and that's the reason we see various corporates across the world taking targets over their scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions, becoming new net zero, carbon neutral, aligning with science-based targets. So all of these things are happening. So the corporate movement is actually going quite strong, because we all realize that there is a gap in the efforts that we are making, and that's the reason we need to move towards this. Even if you talk about the Indian ecosystem specifically, we are seeing a lot of local codes and regulations coming into picture through Bureau of Energy Efficiency. We had earlier things like PAT scheme. We had, for industrial efficiency specifically, we had codes like Energy Conservation Building Code, which was specifically for commercial buildings. Now, in the recent years, we also saw BRSR, Business Responsibility Sustainability Reporting, and also BRSR Core, through which companies can also are required to focus on their value chain sustainability aspects. So all of these things, in the future, we are also seeing the carbon credit trading scheme, or the Indian carbon market, which is now supposed to come up in the coming time. So all of these things are getting kind of collated together. There are a lot of global programs like RE100, EP100, EB100, CE100, science-based target, CDP, GRI, a lot of things in place today. Again, and companies are getting aligned with this, organizations are getting aligned with this, just to make sure that we are all on the right trajectory. And also the green rating systems like your IGBC, LEED, GREHA, PEER, or star rating systems, which are again by Bureau of Energy Efficiency. So again, we are seeing a lot of traction happening in this whole aspect, whether it is from a corporate point of view, or it is from a government point of view, or a regulation point of view. All of these things are really kind of evolving this sustainability and climate change landscape. And that's where it is, while of course it's all our moral responsibility that we go towards these best practices, but now we are also seeing these regulations and frameworks coming into picture, which are kind of making sure that the organizations are aligning with sustainable practices. Now, if we see, we talked about this whole aspect of limiting the emissions in this whole aspect of making sure that we are in the 1.5 degrees Celsius scenario. Now, if we see where exactly the emissions are coming from, it's all about the piece of, if we want to achieve something, we need to know where it is kind of coming from and how to act towards it. So if we talk about the whole aspect of, the source of greenhouse gas emissions, we saw that on an average, our annual greenhouse gas emissions is around the lines of 59 gigatons when it comes to the Okay, so yeah, sorry, I think there was an echo in between. So when it comes to the whole aspect of GHG emissions, we are seeing around 59 gigatons of emissions on an average coming out of the planet through our activities in 1 year. Now, if I see where this is coming from, I see that more than 75% of this is coming from CO2, which is the carbon dioxide piece. While of course you have methane and fluorines and nitrous oxides and other greenhouse gases as well. But the major chunk of this is coming from, as we all know, is carbon dioxide. That's the reason we're always talking about decarbonization. The word itself means the reduction of carbon dioxide. And even when it comes to all our reportings and all our sort of, frameworks and protocols, we'll always see the GHG emissions in terms of CO2 equivalent, because that's where the major chunk lies. Now, if this is what, in terms of the source is, of the major source of greenhouse gas emissions is, and if we see where this is kind of coming from, we see that more than 80% of the CO2 emissions is coming from energy and related processes. Now, this is what then is in terms of action, this is what we need to work on. Now, I don't want to use the word culprit, because energy is what our lives depend upon, but this is that point on which we need to act in order to make sure that we are moving towards a more decarbonized and low carbon intensive world. This is where we need to act on. Now, if we talk about the energy landscape, we can probably say that it can kind of divided into two buckets. One is the energy supply side, which is nothing but the generation of energy. And second is nothing but the demand side, which is the use of energy. So if we talk about now decarbonizing this energy landscape, how we are kind of seeing this whole piece, and this is also coming from various, whether you talk about researches or our own project experience, when it comes to our own operations, or even when we're working with other organizations, this is something that we have seen is that the first thing that we need to do in order to make sure that we are decarbonizing the energy landscape is we need to tackle the energy demand. When we talk about tackling the energy demand, we are talking about seeing that we are decarbonizing the demand side, the use of energy, which in this context is nothing but it comes from a couple of major aspects. First is reduction of resources and energy use. So whether it is even if you talk about like any sort of organization or facility or industry or building which is going for a decarbonization roadmap, the first thing that is always required is how much can we reduce our energy demand, which is nothing but the whole aspect of energy efficiency or even resource efficiency. So make sure that the first thing is we have to become energy efficient in our operations. And the first thing when we talk about energy efficiency is use digitization as an enabler of that particular aspect. Because if we talk about energy efficiency in particular, it's as simple as this, that you can't manage what you don't measure. So digitization kind of brings that thing in front of you in terms of how the energy is being utilized in various operations, in various processes, and then it gives us that vision, or it gives us that whole picture of where are the opportunities to reduce the same. However, today, even just measuring is not important. It's only not about just collecting the data, but also analyzing those data points so that we can see what are the actions for reducing the energy use as well. So that is where the whole aspect of energy use, sort of comes into picture when it comes to improving energy efficiency and using digitization as a means to do that. The second thing in this case comes is, can we design and build for low carbon? Earlier, our whole thing used to be that, okay, whatever we are purchasing in terms of equipment or in terms of the whole aspect of the major energy consuming things like pumps, motors, compressors, whatever we are purchasing, we want to make sure that they are as energy efficient as possible, which still applies. Now, the conversation has moved a bit ahead than that. What is the amount of carbon that we are taking into the facility when it comes to getting or designing any new project? So whether it is designing a new project, or whether it is designing a complete facility, or whether it is designing a complete, a building, an industry, or a factory, what is it that I'm taking in terms of the carbon when it comes to any equipment or any project that I'm having? So first thing, before we get into the conversation of how can we reduce the carbon intake, is that anything that we are intaking, can we have a carbon footprint of that particular aspect? Can we design in a manner that everything or anything that is getting procured is having a low carbon footprint? So this is where the whole aspect of designing and building for low carbon comes into picture. And that is again is going to contribute to make sure that our efficiency or our energy aspect is reduced and efficiency aspect is improved. Circularity, a very important aspect. Today, the conversation is not just about what is it in terms of operations, in terms of the current operations. It is all about life cycle values or life cycle analysis. Now, if you see, we have this whole aspect of, we talk about the end of life of certain assets or certain equipment or certain projects. What is it that we can do towards the end of its life? Is there something that we can do in terms of recycling, reusing? Are there ways through which we can kind of convert the last mile into raw material again, so that there is a whole circular economy piece getting established? So this is another aspect which comes into picture, which is needed for sustainability, is the circularity piece. So all in all, this complete aspect of energy efficiency and resource efficiency contributes to around 25% in terms of emission reduction, which can happen through various opportunities. The other aspect of decarbonizing energy demand is this whole piece of electrifying processes. Why electrification? Because electrification is the most efficient and the fastest way to decarbonize the process. Today, if we are having a process that is getting, that is utilizing heat or that is using thermal energy, the best way that I can decarbonize that process, or the most efficient way I can decarbonize that process, because if suppose if that particular process is using coal or briquettes or any fuel, I can't decarbonize coal, right? But what I can do is I can make sure that if the process is using electricity, then I can make sure that electricity is coming from a non-fossil fuel source of energy. So that is the second thing which we need to focus on, which is electrifying the whole aspect of the various processes that we are using, so that we can decarbonize them as well. As we see that today, the transport segment, whether you talk about the vehicles or the automobile, or even if you talk about the aspect of the rail network which is there, everywhere this is how we are kind of proceeding forward to decarbonize the same. Our first objective is that can we electrify it, and then of course the next thing becomes make sure that electricity is coming from a non-fossil fuel source of energy. Electrification here is just is not an end in itself, but it's just a means to achieve an end here, because we also want to make sure that it is coming from a clean source of power. And this is where comes the second aspect, which is the whole piece of seeing the demand side. So as we saw, there was this whole piece of demand side. Then we have this whole aspect of seeing the supply side as well. Now, on the supply side, when we talk, we are talking about this whole piece of making sure that the electricity that we are using is coming from a green source of energy as well. And this is where the whole aspect of supply side comes into picture. I think there seems to be some issue with the presentation, so I'm resharing the same. Just give me a moment. Okay. Hope this is again visible to everyone.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when we are talking about this whole aspect of electrification, we also have to make sure that the electricity is coming from a clean source of energy. And that's where the whole decarbonization of supply side comes into picture. So there are various mechanisms today existing when it comes to decarbonization of supply side. Of course, we have this whole aspect of on-site renewable energy generation. It can be solar, it can be wind, it can be other areas. Then we also have the off-site use of power, which is nothing but the whole aspect of bilateral off-site power purchase agreements. You have the group captive mechanisms. We also have these days a lot of new sort of concepts coming into picture, like virtual power purchase agreements, VPPAs. All of these are there to make sure that how can we decarbonize our supply side. And this is where the whole circle gets completed. That the first step is reduce the energy use and resource use as much as possible. The second step make sure that as many processes as possible are electrified. And then the third step is that make sure that electricity is coming from a green source of power or a renewable source of power. This is exactly how the whole picture goes into play. And just, this is where the whole aspect of technology also comes into picture. So enabled by technology, this is where we can see this complete piece. Around 55% of emission reduction opportunity can come from tackling our demand side, which is nothing but the whole aspect of energy efficiency, process efficiency, circularity, and all of this gets enabled by technologies like digitization, automation, digital twins. All of these things can work on those lines. The second aspect is electrification, where the whole piece of whether it is converting the processes into electric processes, whether it is transport, whether it is the processes that we are using within the industry, the electrification of those processes through heat pumps or electric, or either having from a transport point of view, it is electric vehicles. All of these things can help in electrifying the processes. And then comes the other chunk, which is 45% of emission reduction opportunity, which is about decarbonizing the energy supply. So this is where we are talking about the smart grids and microgrids and renewables, and on-site or off-site power purchase agreements, virtual power plants or virtual power purchase agreements. All of this comes into play in that particular aspect. And if we talk about emission reduction, today 70% of the CO2 emission reduction can be done through these existing technologies. We don't have to look towards the future that, we will have a lot of things like, maybe in future this is going to happen. No, today technologies exist on these lines, which can reduce 70% of the CO2 emissions that can come through any sort of industry or buildings or processes or companies or enterprises. And this is where the power of technology comes into play as well, with the kind of examples that I just gave in this particular section. So this is a kind of first sort of a brief of what is this whole landscape of sustainability and climate change. How are we, kind of proceeding forward in this? If we have to limit the temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius or below, what is it that we need to do in order to reach this particular level, and what are the various areas in terms of interventions, whether it is demand side, supply side, what are the technologies that are kind of prevalent in those cases. All of these was a brief on those lines in this particular case. Now, to move forward and give some examples in terms of how this is happening in practical terms, and how we are kind of working on this for our own operations, as well as how we are working with other companies on the same lines as well, so that you get a sense of how practically all of this is getting implemented as well. So that's where let's look at that particular section in this line. Now, if we talk about Schneider Electric, we were time and again Schneider Electric has been, and I'm very proud to say that it has been recognized by various organizations or agencies across the globe, in India and across the globe, as one of the most sustainable corporations in the world. Recently, we were recognized by Times Magazine as the most sustainable corporation globally. And in past, we have also been ranked by Corporate Knights on a constant basis as one of the most sustainable corporations across the globe. So that is something that we take immense pride in, that we have been doing on those lines. Now, if I give you an overview of how we are doing it, or how we are kind of working on those areas. So this is a typical approach that we follow at Schneider Electric. We follow this whole a three-step approach of strategize, digitize, and decarbonize. So the first thing that we kind of recognize, that in order to kind of reduce the emissions that we are having in our operations or even our value chain, the first thing was that we need to know how much of those emissions are. So of course, the first area was how can we create a complete emission inventarization of our scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. So detailing out that particular aspect in terms of having a baseline. The second piece was, now based on that, now that we have a baseline, we need to see how we can decarbonize in the coming time. So in short term, in mid term, in long term, having a decarbonization roadmap is something that we went with. And then of course, making sure that we are communicating those commitments while aligning with external agencies. So after we had kind of created a decarbonization roadmap, our first sort of approach was that can we get it validated by SBTI, Science Based Target Initiative, so that it makes sure it gives that credibility that whatever what we have done or what we are doing, even not just for external world, for even for an internal purpose as well, that what we have devised is something that is in line with how things should be. So that is where the whole idea of communicating the commitments in terms of reporting, whether it is a GRI reporting, it's CDP, climate disclosure or carbon disclosure projects, whether it is on the lines of BRSR, from an India point of view in that case, or even aligning those things with SBTI Science Based Target Initiative to make sure that everything is being monitored, tracked, and is validated successfully as well. So that was the first area that we worked on when it comes to strategize. The second part was digitize. In digitize, the whole idea is that that we have a strategy in place, can we make sure that we are on an ongoing basis, on a real time or near to real time basis, we want to make sure that we are measuring our whether it is our resource use, it can be energy, it can be water, it can be other areas of resources, or even in terms of emissions, in terms of what is our scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions, how we are, we want to monitor it on an ongoing basis and make sure that we identify opportunities to save or to reduce as well. And then, of course, the idea is to report and benchmark on the same lines too. So that's where the second approach, the second step was, which one was in terms of digitizing this whole aspect. The third thing was, now that we have a strategy in place, we have a complete, a digital sort of roadmap and a mechanism to track things, in that case, to track our progress, we also want to make sure that we are actually implementing actions as well. So third thing was decarbonize, where we were talking about, again, with the same approach of the first thing is how can we be most energy efficient? How can we reduce our demand as much as possible? Are there places where we can electrify our operations and then make sure that electricity, not just that, but the overall electricity is coming from a renewable source of energy? And lastly, and more importantly, the whole aspect of scope 3 emission. How can we engage our complete value chain? While we are trying or striving to do best in class work in our own operations, can we engage our complete value chain in terms of reducing our scope 3 emissions as well? That was definitely the last piece but that we wanted to look at as well. So this is the typical approach of strategize, digitize, decarbonize that Schneider Electric is constantly working on. And this is just to give you, again, most of you would be aware about this particular aspect, but the whole idea here was how can we measure our scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. For those who may not know these terminologies, scope 1 is what basically our direct emissions are, which are coming from the company owned assets. Scope 2 is what we call as the indirect emissions, which are happening although because of the assets or because of the operations that we have, but are not happening in our premise, the best example being electricity. And the third thing was scope 3, which was indirect emissions, which is basically the whole aspect of everything other than scope 1 and 2, whether it is the scope 3 upstream part, which is coming from our suppliers, transports or logistics related aspects, or the whole aspect of goods and services that we are procuring. And it can be scope 3 downstream as well, which is basically happening because of the products and solutions that we are supplying to our clients and customers. So that's what the scope 3 piece is. So the first aspect was to measure all these things, scope 1, 2, and 3. And then this is just a snapshot of the various digital tools that we have. So I'm just showing you some screenshots here. So on a regular basis, on an ongoing basis, measuring, monitoring our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions with respect to site level and with respect to enterprise level as well. So seeing how much of the emissions are happening on a regular basis. Here, it's a month-to-month comparison that we have given. It can also be an year-to-year comparison, how the emissions are going forward. what is the source of those emissions, how much is coming from gas, diesel, electricity, or any other scope 3 categories that we have. We have 15 categories in scope 3. So which categories emissions are coming from, which are my hotspots, to make sure, again, in order to make sure that we are targeting the right area, we need to see which are those hotspots. And this is how the digital platforms have helped us to see that which are those areas where we are having most of our hotspots in terms of emissions, where we need to take actions, which are the low hanging fruits. All of this, becomes very much visible in front of you when you start tracking or having a digital mechanism in place to measure all these things. Even, do a vis-a-vis comparison of sites. Which sites of mine are having a higher emission intensity, which sites of the organization are having a lower emission intensity. All of these things can be tracked, and this is how we are doing that. We are tracking it on a single platform. We are seeing that how these things are being where are the opportunities to save, which are the opportunities to reduce. All of these things is being done through digital platforms. And this is how, combining our complete strategy and our complete, the whole digital framework that we have, this is the complete roadmap that we have created, which we are also tracking the progress on. So just to give you all an idea, this is what Schneider Electric's roadmap for achieving our net zero commitment is, where in terms of a short-term target, we will be carbon neutral in our own operations across all Schneider Electric scope 1 and 2 by 2025. By 2030, we will be having net zero readiness in our own operations when it comes to scope 1 and 2. By 2040, we will be having an end-to-end carbon neutral value chain which is basically we're talking about scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And by 2050, we are targeting to have a net zero CO2 value chain. And all of these targets are also being aligned and validated by SBTi, Science Based Target Initiatives, as well. And in order to make sure that we are achieving these objectives, we are taking various measures in place as well. So on the scope 3 upstream side, we are doing various, and this is something I will kind of detail it out in the coming slide as well. But when it comes to our scope 3 upstream part, we are making sure that we also work with the suppliers to decarbonize them as well. And any material that we are purchasing, make sure that it is on the lines of having a green material aspect, or the packaging also that we are having, it's a green packaging, so that basically the whole idea is to have a lower carbon emission intensity in all those raw materials that we are procuring from our scope 3 upstream aspect. In the scope 3 downstream piece, where a major chunk of our of our value chain lies, again the idea is that how can we have more and more, so the products that we are kind of supplying to our clients, to our customers in various projects, the whole idea is how can we, on a very regular and an ongoing basis and a progressive basis, how can we reduce the impact of those products and those solutions in a very in a manner that this is something which is getting reflected in the complete sort of carbon reduction piece as well. So we are continuously striving to make our products more and more less in terms of carbon intensity. We are making sure that they are more green, less carbon intensive day in, day out. That's the effort that we are trying to make, so that we make sure that this whole piece of downstream scope 3 can be reduced in our case as well. And then there is a very special objective that we have, where we are even working with various customers in projects of ours, and we have kind of taken an ambition that how can we help them achieve carbon reduction as well. So we have taken an ambition to make sure that 800 million tons of CO2 emissions is reduced from our customers or the clients or the organizations that we are working with in these particular time by 2025. So this is something that is the overall net zero commitment or objective of the organization. Just to give you a sense of how we are also working on these lines. So something in the beginning I told you about this whole approach of strategize, digitize, decarbonize. I showed you how the strategy piece, this is how the strategy piece is being built. We have a complete, sort of a roadmap of creating, of having less carbon emission in our operation and value chain. We are also working with a digital platform. which is again an in-house platform to make sure that we are tracking the whole thing. And then comes the third aspect, which is about how we are decarbonizing or actually implementing projects to make sure that the emission reduction is happening as well. To give you that example, I'll take one example of one of our factories, which is our factory in Hyderabad. This is again a very sort of best-in-class factory recognized recently by World Economic Forum as the lighthouse for Industry 4.0 and sustainability practices. So if you see, in India, this is only the second factory which is recognized by World Economic Forum as a sustainability lighthouse. And if we talk about the kind of work that has been happening in this area, so it is equipped with our cutting edge Industry 4.0 technologies, which is basically on the lines of digitization, a real-time data and predictive analytics sort of system for smart manufacturing and smart decision making. And just to give you a high level idea of what is the kind of impact that we have achieved at our Hyderabad factory over the last 4 years, we have reduced the energy consumption of our factory by almost 59% in the last 4 years, optimized the waste by 64%, CO2 emission decreased by 61%, and almost 57% of reduced water consumption as well in the last 4 years. All of this has been achieved again through this whole aspect of using technologies, various technologies on the lines of digitization, Industry 4.0. And just to give you some examples of what we have done there. So, this is some of the key projects that we have implemented at our Hyderabad factory. One is about the whole aspect of having a data-driven energy management with advanced analytics. So all the assets, whether it is the HVAC aspect, the chillers, the precision air conditioners, the production lines, every asset is connected through Internet of Things, IoT-enabled aspects, and it is being done on a real-time monitoring basis so that their consumption, everything is being monitored on a real-time basis. And all of these assets are connected to each other. So there is an integrated closed loop architecture for all the assets where through the data that is being, going to the IoT driven platforms, we are able to analyze and see which are the actionable projects. So it's like, suppose there is a complete aspect of a chiller, which is there in the system. What is it in terms of, giving predictive analysis that, okay, this is the sort of supply air temperature that should be. This is the return temperature that should be for the chiller. All of these intelligent insights are coming from this complete connectable assets. And it is also being, recognized in terms of what is the optimal loading of the chiller, what is the optimal sort of, sharing in terms of the output that any utility is providing. So whether it is a chiller, whether it is a compressor, whether it is any other particular asset, all of them are being integrated on a single platform from a digitization point of view, so that there is an optimization opportunity available. And through advanced analytics, those projects are identified as well, whether it is load optimization, whether it is optimization in terms of set points, of output, of temperature. All of these things are providing those particular areas of savings. Another important project was having a smart air compressor optimization using a predictive and closed loop control. So again, if you see this whole aspect of compressor, as I was mentioning in the previous example, everything is connected through a digital platform on a single IoT enabled piece like a building management system. We are having, let's say in this particular case of air compressors, equalizers to make sure that there is an optimum load sharing of compressors. There's a real-time monitoring of happening of inline pressure along with the flow of critical assets. So there is a predictive analysis being happening here that how much compressed air is required. Accordingly, the energy consumption is modulated, the compressor operations are modulated, and accordingly, so there is no sort of manual intervention required in terms of modulating certain things. Based on the output, because everything is connected, the input is getting modulated, and that is giving a very good amount of reduction in energy savings, and then of course, hence the reduction in emissions as well. And thirdly, very important, having an end-to-end digital greenhouse gas. So I showed you in the previous slides about how scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, everything is being monitored on a single platform. So there is a end-to-end digital greenhouse gas tracking platform across the entire value chain, which is scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. The data is being captured through the suppliers as well. And this is where, I want to emphasize on a very important project that I'm going to showcase in the next slide. But the whole aspect of an end-to-end tracking of digital greenhouse gas emissions is allowing a lot of action items to be identified in terms of opportunities so that we can make sure that the emission reduction can happen as well. A very important project, since we talked about the whole aspect of scope 3 and suppliers. And this is where, I go back to the initial conversation where we talked about, Mr. Mohan was telling about that what is something that you are doing when it comes to the MSMEs or the tier 1 or the tier 2, tier 3, facilities in that case. So this is what we have as a project. This is called the Zero Carbon Project. Schneider Electric has taken an ambition, which is this is what we are running as part of this project, that we want to make sure that we will reduce 50% of CO2 emissions from our top 1,000 suppliers. Now, this is where we are working with those companies, and 70% of those suppliers happen to be medium-sized, medium, small, or micro enterprises, MSMEs, as we call it. So this is what we are doing, or we are working with them. We are working with them in terms of capacity building, technology transfer, doing assessments at their level, and even providing them with digital tools and digital solutions so that those small and medium or enterprises can measure, can monitor their complete scope 1 and 2 emissions, and at the same time they can also realize which are the areas on which they can improve in terms of emission reduction as well. So we are kind of working with them on capacity building, training, technology transfer, implementing of projects, or facilitating the implementation of projects which can help them in reducing the emissions of their scope 1 and 2. And all of this is also happening through a digital platform where there's a digital platform that we have provided to our suppliers, on which they just have to put on their basic details of energy or electricity consumption, and the software automatically converts that particular data in terms of the emission baseline and creates a decarbonization roadmap for them as well in terms of what they can do to reduce the emissions also. So this is a very important tool that through which we are helping our suppliers in becoming decarbonized as well. And most of those suppliers happen to be MSME industries in that particular case. And in this project, almost as of the target that we have is around 50% emission reduction by 2025. As of Q3 2024, like as of last year, now we'll have the new results coming in December. But till the last quarter, in the last previous year, we had reduced 36% of emissions coming from those top 1,000 suppliers in this particular case. And all of this we are able to do through this program of the Zero Carbon Project, where we are working with those small and medium-sized industries and enterprises so that we can reduce our scope 3 emissions. And this is something I also want to highlight in terms of what is that particular digital solution is. So we have an enterprise solution, which is called Resource Advisors, which is something that we are tracking our own consumption on in terms of our scope 1, scope 2 emissions, which I showed for the snapshots in the previous slide as well. Then we have this tool called Zygo, which is something that we are using for our own suppliers, which is something that through which our suppliers are becoming decarbonized on these lines as well. So it's a typical software as a sort of subscription and service decarbonization software, which small industries, MSMEs, this is specifically designed for MSMEs that can use this particular tool, and they can make sure that these emissions that they're having in their scope 1 and 2 can be reduced as well. In future, we are also now striving to measure the scope 3 emissions of our suppliers and make sure that we are able to help them in that particular piece as well. So this is also something that we are now sort of in our next step, we will be targeting to go for. And this is how we have been sort of working on these lines as well. As a matter of fact, since, in the previous slides also I mentioned about how we are also working with other organizations in terms of helping them in reducing their emissions as well, or helping them in terms of reducing their consumption, resource consumption, energy consumption, all these things as well. So there we are also actually working with the supply chain of various industries. So whether you talk about pharma industry, we are working with the supply chain of pharma industries. We are working with the supply chain of semiconductor industries. We are working with the supply chain of retail industries, retail chain industries. So all of these supply chains also we are working with to make sure that we are able to decarbonize the suppliers of those particular companies as well. And again, this digital tool is the backbone of those works or those projects that we are working or we are doing with them. And similarly, this is something that we are doing it for our own suppliers also in this case. Lastly, as I mentioned about areas where we are working in terms of helping other organizations as well in terms of using technology to help them in that particular case. This is just one example of the same. We are working with Capgemini, which was the certified first corporate net zero campus for India as driven by GBC. So we are working with them with Capgemini in terms of digitizing their complete operations in the country, which is basically 23 IT campuses and more than 70 buildings. And it's a multi-site command and control center that we have established for them, which has helped them in improving their energy efficiency by almost 30% in this case. So you can imagine the kind of scope 1 and scope 2 reduction that they would have done on those lines as well. And this is something that is getting aligned with their sustainability goals too. So if you see how this is happening, again, the whole idea is that all the assets, all the utilities, all the assets which are there in the facility are all connected to each other so that you have those intelligent insights, predictive insights, analytics in front of you that can help you in further reducing your energy use in this case. This is another example where we are working with a pharma company in India where more than 16,000 tons of CO2 reduction is something that we are kind of, given them a complete roadmap of, which is equivalent to some 13 crore rupees of energy cost saving as well. But the whole idea is that, again, that approach of how energy efficiency, electrification, and renewables together can work in this area is something that we are doing with this organization as well. So whether it is about creating a complete strategy on energy efficiency solutions, whether it is on the lines of electrifications, like having your fossil fuel boiler replaced with electric boilers, having heat pump solutions into the picture, improving the system efficiency for boiler steam in this particular case, having renewable energy projects into picture, whether it is about on-site renewable energy projects or off-site projects, like your bilateral PPAs. All of these things are being kind of taken into consideration in this case, and that is how we are working with them to make sure that we are able to reduce almost 20 to 30% of their emissions in this particular case. So towards the end, I just want to kind of give you this piece of what we believe in as an organization. So sustainability is very much integrated in the purpose and mission of our organization, and which is to create an impact by empowering all to make the most of our energy and resources, making sure that we bridge progress and sustainability for all. And this is what at Schneider Electric we call Life is On. And our mission is to be whether it is external organizations or the society or the world in general, to be the trusted partner in sustainability and efficiency. So this is the lines on which we are working, and that's the reason we are working on creating all the impacts that I just mentioned to you about. So here I would kind of kind of conclude and summarize. And again, I would kind of reiterate the same thing that what we mentioned in the beginning. In the beginning, when Mr. Mohan and the other dignitaries was mentioning earlier, that the way we are going to kind of overcome this whole aspect of sustainability is to make sure that we are collaborating as much as possible. There is knowledge exchange happening, and make sure that we are working together on these challenges. That's how I think we will be able to succeed in this whole aspect of reaching the areas, whether it is the limiting of climate change aspect or the sustainability piece. And of course, technology becomes a backbone in that particular aspect. So this is uh, it from my side. Thank you, everyone. I'm happy to take any questions or comments that anyone would have, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Rohit, for such a insightful presentation. Dear participants, we have enabled the audio. Please go ahead in asking your questions. We have Dr. Rajat Shaha.
Yeah, I was
Sir.
waiting for this.
Yes, sir.
It
Please
was a
go
very
ahead.
good presentation, and I have already heard this Schneider. I can say it's a very good presentation. I heard this previously in CAA conference also in Delhi, and it's a very remarkable suggestion. I have also been always advocating being an author of the book on CSR and ESG. The second edition of which was published recently by LexisNexis. I have been advocating the cause of reduction, reuse, recycle, reclaim, the 4 R's. Now, I just wanted to know whether is there any study which is analyzing the sector-wise technology that could be applied. For example, we have heard sufficiently about the aerospace, where the aircraft companies are always bringing out something in reduction of CO2 emission, energy consumption reduction, and consequently CO2. And you have also given your own personal experience of your organization. It was very wonderful. Do we have any study of these are all the major sectors where we need to have this technology is available, this capital infusion is required? Is there anything like that? I just wanted to get some clarity. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
No, sure. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the kind words, and good to know that you were able to find this insightful. So, in terms of the sector-specific studies that you are mentioning, yes, there have been certain studies in that sense, in terms of what is the kind of emission reduction potential that the industry or the particular sector has, and what is the kind of investment that may go into that particular area. Now, if you talk about on an average, we have seen that from an efficiency point of view, if you talk about, there is on an average reduction potential of which goes up to 30% that these typical segments and sectors have. Of course, it can vary from segment to segment for a particular piece, but on an average, this is what is seems in those particular lines. In terms of the investment, if you talk about, generally for an energy efficiency project to be effective, we are seeing something along the lines of a return which comes, if the return is coming at around 3 year or less than 3 year mark, that is generally considered to be a good investment when it comes to an energy efficiency project. So this is how you can kind of correlate it from an investment point of view, that will be there. And other than that, if you talk about what can be the overall macro specific view of an industry, there are sector specific studies available, although one may have to see whether it goes as much deep as, for let's say, an aero sort of space company or aero defense company or not. But yes, to some extent you can find these average points that I'm just mentioning about in most of your sector specific areas.
Thank you, sir.
So, yeah, good afternoon. This is Rajendra Babu from TVS Motor Company.
Hello, sir.
Thank you very much for the excellent presentation on sustainability. Lot of insights. In fact, we are working with the scope 1 and scope 2. We have a better control. I mean, it is internal. When it comes to scope 3, so what unique thing has been done to bring your suppliers into scope 3 or to understand sustainability and move forward? We are also trying for the last 1 year. Separate team has been formed and we are working with the suppliers. But somehow,
Right.
I mean, the progress with regard to scope 3 or of our suppliers is not in line with the internal scope 1 and scope 2. What unique thing has been done by Schneider? That's what I wanted to know, sir. Thank you.
Sure. So, Mr. Rajendra, you raised a very pertinent point. Scope 3 is definitely that bigger challenge which is there in this particular area. Now, when we started with, I also gave you that example of this zero carbon project that we are running for our suppliers. When we started with this project in 2021, the first thing that we found out in this area was that the biggest thing was, one was majority of our suppliers were MSMEs. And the biggest challenge there that we found was that in terms of awareness and capacity building, things were not there. So they didn't have much idea of what the emission scope 1 and 2 emissions are, how to measure them, how to monitor them, what are the kind of projects that can help them in reducing the same. All of these things were missing. So our first thing was to make sure that a proper capacity building is done. So that is where we started with. We kind of brought them all onto a platform. We did workshops with them. We kind of gave them this idea of what are the various ways through which you can get decarbonized. We also used this digital tool that I was mentioning about in the presentation, where through the digital tool, they're able to track, monitor, and they're able to get those insights that how they can reduce their emissions as well. And then we also kind of introduced them to various decarbonization, what are the ways decarbonization projects that they can implement, maybe doing certain audits and assessments at their facilities. So all these things combined with a business case, that this is something which will reduce your emissions, but it will also generate these energy cost saving for you. It will also make your bottom line become more profitable in that particular case. All of this, when combined with a business case, was kind of given in front of them, various mechanisms of how they can have projects. Can they have projects in shared saving model? Can they have projects in performance guarantee model? Can they have projects where they don't have to invest a capex? All of these things, these readiness, this is something was given to them, and that kind of enabled them to go for these various projects. And then they were able to kind of implement those actions. And one thing that we saw was, once the actions are getting implemented, whether it is on the lines of renewables, whether it is on the lines of energy efficiency or electrifications, once the actions get implemented and they reap the benefits of it, then it's a cycle. Then the cycle has start moving, and then they are able to see that yes, beyond emission reduction, there is also a whole aspect of improving their resilience in terms of cost, in terms of profits that they can gain out of all these measures. So that is something that has worked for us in this particular case. I'm happy to maybe connect with you on this separately and detail it out even further in terms of what all things we did at ground level in terms of projects and all those things. That I'm also happy to do maybe with you as a one-on-one, discussion in this case.
Thank you. Thank you,
Rohit,
Mr. Rohit.
I have one question. Can I ask you?
Sure, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah. I was listening to your presentation. It was very good. But what I have in my mind is only the total energy requirement. Have you digitized any time? Number one. Number two, what could be generated out of unconventional energy resources? That is zero emission, zero carbon emission. What could be the total energy generatable? And what is the gap? But one side it is a total requirement, one side what can be generated. There will be a gap. So that gap cannot be brought down. No, you cannot make it to zero carbon emission. You can make it to a level wherein, okay, it has come to this level. And then the rest of it, you have to sort it out. Now, have your digitization brought out any percentage of that? That is what my question.
Okay. Sure. I guess it is Mr. Jairaj, right?
No, I am Colonel Hari
Okay,
Prasad.
sorry. Okay, sorry, sir. Okay. So, okay, sir. Thank you for the question. If I get it correctly, the first question was, are you digitizing your complete energy footprint, right? That is what your first question was. Am I correct?
Yes.
Right. So yes, to answer to that question is yes. the complete energy footprint is digitized in terms of how and where the energy is being utilized, in terms of which assets it is going to, which are the areas it is getting utilized into, at what point of time, how much energy is being used. All of this is digitized and is available on a platform to track the same. And this gives those, sort of intelligent insights and analytics in terms of where the opportunities also lies to reduce and save the energy aspect as well. That is something which we have also seen from our own experience. So that is the first point which is there. The second aspect that you asked was in terms of
Renewable
what can be
energy.
done in terms of, sorry, sir, you were saying something?
Renewable energy.
Yes, yes. So second thing that you asked was in terms of how can in a factory or a building or a facility can strive to become getting the complete energy from a zero carbon point of view, like not having any conventional sort of fossil fuel based power in
Yes,
that case.
yes.
So what, and this is something I touched upon in at some point also in during the presentation. So these days, sir, there are various mechanisms which are available now through which you can source green power. The first mechanism that is there in everyone's mind, and which we all should go for at the first stage as well, is the whole on-site part. That on an basis of having an on-site generation, how much we can have in terms of renewables. And that is something which is there, and this is something that a lot of times at after a point of time you can't do further because there is a space constraint, there is a constraint in terms of certain physical attributes where we can't go beyond a certain point when it comes to on-site renewable sources. There, the point comes in terms of certain other mechanisms which are now available in this whole landscape, which is about the off-site part. So this is something that can also help an organization, which is about the off-site procurement of renewable energy, which we also call as the bilateral power purchase agreements. There is a way of group captive mechanisms of renewable energy power, where you are not having the plant in your premise, but you are sourcing power from somewhere else where the plant has been set up. So all of these mechanisms are today available, through which you can, after a point of time when the on-site capability or potential is fully utilized, after that you can move to these measures of off-site procurement or sourcing power from another area, from another site which is outside your organization's parameter. All of these things can help an organization in further increasing the share of green energy in their particular piece.
Yeah. Now, third point which I have is about the electrification of vehicles and other things.
Right,
Are we
sir.
postponing the what do you call environmental hazard to 5 years, 10 years? Because the battery which has to be disposed of after 5 years, because the life of battery is generally around 5 years. After that, what will happen to these batteries, electrical batteries?
No,
Has anyone thought about it?
No, I think they're very, again, a very pertinent point. Yes, this is a challenge when it comes to electric vehicles. Today, what we are having in front of us is that when it comes to the batteries, tomorrow, if we go into the same sort of, trajectory, this particular piece can be a big problem. I completely agree with you on that part. But I also, on the same side, I also have, sir, one piece, and this is a point where we can always go back and forth, but this is something which I want to put out here, is that every time, we have to see in terms of what is the best available technology. I completely agree with you in terms of that there is an angle of battery, there is an angle of environmental hazard as well. But today, if I compare it with, let's say, a fossil fuel powered vehicle, today, if I compare it with using those conventional sources of energy, today, if I compare it in with that manner, what is the best available technology that I have? To be very honest, having an electric vehicle is also not just enough. If you are charging your electric vehicle with a grid powered electricity, you're still defeating the purpose. Because in that case, what we are doing just is we are just transferring the scope 1 to scope 2 emissions. The emissions will still be the same because our grid emission factor is not still at that up to mark, which will kind of make it a positive case for using an electric vehicle. So all of these challenges are there, but that is the way through which a transition can happen, because using fossil fuel for the longest time is not going to be a solution. So this is the way a transition is going to happen. I'm very sure that the technologies are going to evolve in future through which we are able to solve this battery related issues as well. There will be, sort of those areas that will come into picture where we are able to kind of either do the whole better way of recycling and reusing of batteries. We are not able to harm any environment related aspects through the battery use. There are areas in the future where we are talking about even the whole aspect of biofuels, or certain aspects where green fuels are being kind of promoted as well. So all of these things will come into picture, and it will be a combined solution. If you ask me, can only electrification help the solution problem? No, it can't help. Electrification is just one of the means to do it, and that is where we are trying to put this transition into picture. But there will be a lot of nuts and bolts around it, lots of nitty-gritties around it that also has to be taken care of. So just moving and taking an electric vehicle is not the solution. It's just one of the means to reaching the solution in future. That's how, sir, I would kind of put it as.
No, I agree with you, Rohit, and I fully understand that you have addressed this to a certain extent. But the point is, lithium-ion batteries are very, very harmful to the environment. It is
Agreed, sir.
hazardous. No,
Agreed.
we can't throw it anywhere. No, most
Right.
of the people who have bought even two-wheelers or four-wheelers have plenty of lithium-ion batteries. And after 2 years, it will be there for disposal. Now, how are you going to do it?
No, I completely agree with you, sir. And this is where, we'll have to strengthen our whole aspect of better way of recycling, reusing the whole aspect of, whether it is come to battery aspect as well. So we have to make sure that we are kind of, working in that way that it's not getting just dumped and disposed and harming the environment, but make sure that we are able to put this whole aspect of recycling, reusing, circular economy, all these things into picture. I completely agree that that needs to be taken care of. Otherwise, the fight is incomplete. Doesn't serve the purpose.
Yeah, Rohit. I'm Jairaj here, Sansera Engineering. Good evening. Very
Yes.
nice
Good evening.
presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Gerald.
My question is here, the scope 1, scope 2 very clear. The scope 3, there are the 15 categories, some out of which some 8 or 9 category applicable to our type of industry for automotive ancillary. Here, that capital goods and the investment and all, how you calculated as a Schneider, how you calculated that? Because some machine tool supplier, how they are procuring that scope 2 data, how you are calculated, and investment. Suppose we are investing some construction, we are doing some building construction, we are doing some lot of investment we are doing. How we are calculating that scope 3? That is what we want to know.
So, okay, sure, sir. So when it comes to this whole aspect of, let's say you talked about the category 2, which is this whole aspect of, capital goods, which is there. Now, there are various ways through which, generally this particular calculation happens. So when it comes to capital goods, you have certain areas like, and again, this is where it depends upon what is the kind of maturity your suppliers have. If the ideal situation will be that if I'm getting a capital good from a supplier, and that is having a product carbon footprint of that particular thing. If that is there, that's the best thing for me. That's how you can have the complete product level cradle to gate, what we call as that sort of GHG inventory from the goods that are being supplied to you. But generally what happens is that sort of detailing is not available with all of your suppliers or all the suppliers which are there. So then you have to stick to another method. So there are methods like spend-based method, where depending upon how much we are spending and on what type of good we are spending, there are certain emission factors from various industries that are available in this particular case, and that is then how we are kind of we have to estimate those emissions in that case. Now it is not a very accurate method of estimating the emissions, but then this is where we have to kind of because there is no data available, so we have to stick to these sort of basic measures to calculate emissions. Generally, how a best practice is to apply a hybrid method. So suppose there are certain suppliers in which we have there is a data point available in terms of capturing this whole aspect of actual emissions, which is called as product carbon footprint, which is there. If suppose that is available, then maybe for those suppliers, this is the way through which the emission calculation can happen. But for certain suppliers where there is no sort of such data available, there we use average spend based or average product based or volume based method in terms of estimating the emissions that can come from those suppliers. And this is the way it can become a hybrid method. And the way we should strive forward should be that more and more in future we are able to have our suppliers come on to the supplier specific activity based method and make more and more suppliers move away from spend based method. That will be, let's say, the natural progression to improve this exercise. That's how generally, sir, this particular piece goes.
Okay. You are also done same spend-based method for Schneider?
Sir, it's, as I mentioned, it's the hybrid method. There are certain suppliers. There are certain suppliers who have this data when it comes to the actual carbon footprint of the goods being supplied. Then there are certain suppliers whom we are encouraging that they should shift to this method. So they are in between somewhere. So certain goods we are calculating from a spend base because there is no data available in certain cases. But we are pushing more and more, or we are encouraging more and more of our suppliers to switch to a actual emission based carbon footprint data in that case.
Because future the CBAM is coming to picture carbon border.
Exactly.
That the customer is demanding per part what is the carbon emission. In this case, we cannot, without the scope 3, we cannot declare that carbon. So with scope 3 only we can able to declare that any of spend-based method or hybrid method, any one method is required to calculate to declare that carbon emission for the product. That's what. Thank you.
Right, sir. Okay, again, on that front, again, Mr. Jairaj, I'll be happy to discuss more on that front with you. We can always, connect and also have a detailed discussion on that front. I can share even further details on that line to further have that discussion.
Yeah. Thank you.
A short question, Mr. Rohit. Can I go ahead?
Sure. Please,
Prakash here from Agribusiness.
Sure, sir.
No, I just want to know if Schneider has worked with agribusiness and food processing companies, especially in India.
Right. Hello, sir. Is there a question?
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. You're audible. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Wanted to know if Schneider has worked with agribusiness or food processing companies in India in this direction, actually.
Yes, we have. So when it comes to like food processing or food and beverage industry in that way, we have been working with quite a few organizations on that front, on this lines of even helping them in becoming more efficient and decarbonized and sustainable as well. So yes, that's very much something, sir, we have been working. And again, the backbone of that is again the whole aspect of technology, digitization, and